You know, they're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, you'll do nothing. You'll do fucking nothing. Not one of you'll do nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. You know, I was out there, I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. It's normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I'm gonna beat you into the living death. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal. Nick, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated death match. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
Yes. What is up? What is up, MCR family? Another daily edition of the show where we discuss all things in the combat sports world, whether it's boxing, MMA, and everything in between. Live on YouTube and obviously podcast forum on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Call in 323-870-4051. If you are international, email me, mixedcombatradio@gmail.com, so I can get you that international call-in link. And obviously, patreon.com/mixedcombatradio help support the channel in a financial way. But of course, there's free ways like liking the show, sharing the show, subscribing, or like I said on podcast form, drop the iTunes review. It's always helpful to get awareness and spread the exposure of the show and what we're trying to build here. I hope everyone's having a great day out there. Who was it? Was it Main Event Mark? Yes, I think it was Main Event Mark. Saying, working still, but I got you on the down low. Yes, for all of those that are still working right now, salute to you. For those that are listening on your commute, salute to you. And for those that are listening at home, smoking or drinking, whatever you're doing, relaxing, obviously, salute to everyone. Come on. We're here to talk some fights, talk some news, obviously. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Wayne, Main Event Mark, Bayside, Gary, I did watch the Superfly fights. I briefly talked about them yesterday. I didn't realize how much controversy was in that scoring, but I thought Nietzsche definitely won that fight. Come on. But good fights overall. Nothing to really, not fight of the years, nothing like that, but good overall action to see. If you haven't seen them yet, definitely go watch the Superfly 3 event, because I know that wasn't watched by basically anyone, let's be real. But that has nothing to do with the show today, because obviously, like you read in the title, like the thumbnail said, it's Canelo. Canelo news. It's Canelo fight week, so obviously he is the predominant topic of the media and just the fans right now. And him coming out, or I should say Oscar coming out and saying that they will now see what options they have out there per networks, because he is a network-free agent after this fight. Interesting. Cannot wait to delve into that topic. Obviously, on the MMA side, BJ Penn officially coming back against Ryan Hall. Obviously, we talked about this earlier, but it's now official. So it is what it is. And plus, obviously, I'm going to get into some more of the HBO, ESPN, and the battle between the two. And really, I think it's time that we call it may be the time that it's the funeral for HBO coming this year. Like, we need to start talking about that. But anyways, digressing. Gary saying I had Pilate 115, 113. I do not disagree with that scorecard. It was a close fight. Pilate, I think, even though he got counted out in terms of his volume, he was landing quite often. He was. So I have no issue with that scorecard at all. Anyways, digressing. I know Gary wanted me to watch that fight. Gary, I did watch it. Sorry. That was not meant to do that. That was actually a complete accident. But digressing, obviously, let's get into the news. Let's get into the topics of the day, all the nitty-gritty stuff. Because, in my opinion, when I heard this, obviously this news is buoyed with the Triple G free agent news, which we discussed, I think, either yesterday's show or the day before, where Triple G has come out and said that he too will be a network free agent after this fight, which had me thinking and obviously theorizing, and that was on yesterday's show, the day before. And then this came out, and again, not as surprising because of that, but still utterly surprising that HBO is seemingly letting go of their two biggest commodities when it comes to boxing. And obviously, let's table that for a second because that's a bigger, more macro discussion about the industry in and of itself. But let me pull up, obviously, the article in question. It first was reported by Lance Pugmire of LA Times. I don't have that article. I'm sorry. But Keith Idek over Boxing, I'll show you guys his article. Because basically just the same quotes, all that stuff. You know how it is. Quite interesting stuff, obviously, from Oscar De La Hoya in terms of this. Just to read the article for a second, per Keith Idek himself in his writing, the Los Angeles Times reported Wednesday that Alvarez's exclusive contract with HBO expires after his pay-per-view main event versus Golovkin on Saturday night at the T-Mobile Arena, blah, blah, blah. Oscar De La Hoya, whose company promotes Alvarez, told the newspaper that he'll consider a new television or streaming partner for Alvarez because he's not certain about HBO's long-term commitment to boxing. And this is where, yes, I know Anthony Walker's listening somewhere saying, I want that dramatic reading music. Yes, it's here. De La Hoya telling Lance Pugmire of the LA Times, it makes me wonder if HBO even wants to be in boxing. HBO has been my family since I started boxing. It has been my family up until today, except for that brief stint with Showtime. But digressing. I've always given HBO the first and last opportunity, but this is business. Oh, whenever you hear the guy say, oh, but this is business, that's basically business talk for saying, well, fuck them, right? Just saying. I've always given it, where am I at? Business, but I must do what's best for my fighters. I want to do what's best for Canelo's career. And right now, particularly, boxing is big business on television with more than 100 or more than 200 fights a year. And, oh man, this is going to be so good. I may skip down to some of it because it's all pretty repetitive at some point. But at the final quote, let me scroll down so you guys can see it. I don't think you guys can see it yet. There you go. Given the circumstances that boxing is in at this moment, with ESPN, DAZN, and the fact that Fox Television has paid millions, and Showtime is doing many things, it's going to be very interesting for us and Canelo to see what HBO can do to keep him. And ladies and gentlemen, that to me, that final quote is very key about specifically what's going to happen with Canelo. That's the list. Again, all theory and speculation, but that's the list in order of who, in Oscar's mind, they would go to. ESPN number one, which makes complete sense. You know, when I first heard this news, I kind of thought, oh, that means A, HBO is, they're in trouble. Secondly, ESPN just got Canelo Alvarez. That's the way I viewed it. ESPN has been promoting this fight heavily. Oscar has some sort of a television deal with ESPN in some capacity. Don't know the specifics of it, but he does have some deal with them. Obviously, ESPN really going all in with combat sports, both in the UFC and in MMA. The UFC and in boxing. It's going to be interesting to see that if they get Canelo on their side, the ESPN, combat sports conglomerate, not just the ESPN conglomerate as a whole, but just the combat sports part of it, is massive. It will be gigantic. DAZN after that, because obviously, he mentioned streaming services. DAZN should be mentioned. DAZN has a lot of money on the table. And plus, with them really not getting a marquee guy at this point, same with Triple G, and we had the same talk with him, they will overpay. So Triple G is going to get above market value for what he is worth. Same with Canelo. And both guys are worth more than basically anyone in the sport other than maybe AJ, right? So both guys are going to be looking to get a lot of money from both ESPN or DAZN or wherever. And obviously you brought up Fox, and that should make sense. Fox has had Golden Boy cards here and there, and also because of the vacuum that the UFC is leaving, and because, boxing is now being really accepted by Fox and they're putting some money behind it, I'm not surprised at all that Oscar's thinking about that. And also I'm not surprised that Showtime's the last one he mentioned. I feel like Oscar is a little bit jaded, to put it lightly, about his whole experience over there at Showtime. And, of course, it's not Steven Espinosa's fault. It's Richard Schaefer's and Oscar De La Hoya's fault for what happened over there. But that happened under Showtime's banner. And I think that's probably why he mentioned that last, probably why that's really not in the running for a Canelo deal. I think ESPN and DAZN are the top two, and then Fox maybe at number 3. And that's really it. And again, when I heard this news, I was pretty much set in stone that, okay, ESPN is getting Canelo. And quickly, though, just to combine topics, because I want to talk more about HBO as a whole now in more of a macro sense. Per Mike Coppinger's sources, the Eleider Alvarez Sergey Kovalev rematch is likely headed for a January date in Quebec on ESPN. Again, similar to what I've been saying for a very long time. Their first meeting, which Alvarez won via 7th round KO, was televised by HBO. Kovalev's last 14 fights were also on HBO, which holds a first and last on Alvarez Kovalev 2. Obviously, so HBO does have matching rights to this fight. That is obvious. But the writing's on the wall here, ladies and gentlemen, that now Oscar's coming out and saying that he doesn't really know if HBO is in the boxing game. The media, it's been the worst kept secret amongst the media that HBO is kind of disinterested with it, dissatisfied with it in some ways. When Top Rank left, that was really the start of the end for HBO and boxing. It's been a slow death at this point, but if they lose Canelo and Triple G, which, let's be honest, is likely at this point, I really don't see HBO keeping them. It's going to be interesting to see what they can do going forward. Because I think a guy like Daniel Jacobs, let's say if he loses, it really doesn't matter anymore at that point, right? Derevchenko becomes a player. Daniel Jacobs sort of becomes not irrelevant, but he becomes less of a player in that division. When now we have guys like Jamal Charlo, Demetrius Andrade in the mix as well. Derevchenko is going to go back to Showtime or Fox because he is under that PBC banner in a way. There's a lot that they could lose in these next, let's say, 3 or 4 months. In 2019, we could see very possibly HBO have 0 boxing content. Superfly 3 K2 goes to DAZN, which makes a lot of sense. You already have the Ukrainian department of K2 now being affiliated with Matchroom USA and DAZN. That makes the most sense in the world for them, and also put the fights out of the forum. Especially since a lot of these weight classes feature a lot of Asian fighters. Take this shit to Japan and stream it. Put it in a big fucking stadium in Japan. Promote it over there. Make it a little more regional. DAZN has a presence in Japan as well. You could do this. That's my thinking of it. And also, again, HBO, if they lose Triple G, if they lose Canelo, not only will that sort of be the end of it, the Alvarez, Kovalev on top of that, because like Coppinger said, Kovalev's been with HBO for 14 fights. That's 7 years roughly, give or take. Gary saying, then I drop HBO, that's fine, saves me some coin. Yeah, no, it's not an issue for us consumers. It really isn't. But the fallout of it is interesting. And again, I think there's a lot of maybe older fans that they still think of HBO as the home of boxing for a long time. And that's now completely different. And for, let's say, the 50 and up, 60 and up crowd that watches the sport, right? Again, people that aren't cued in with streaming, have no idea how to fucking work ESPN Plus. Keep looking for an ESPN Plus app that's separate from the ESPN app. that demographic, this does hurt them in a way. I think in the long run that really doesn't matter. You know, I think obviously that's not the crux of this argument or this discussion is that demographic, but that consumer group will lose out. But most of us, we're going to luck out. We're going to find, I think, a lot of our content getting pushed on ESPN and Fox, two basically free channels. That's fantastic. For more my generation, the streamers, I think DAZN and ESPN Plus is fantastic for us. It's convenient for us. It's user-friendly for us as well. Maybe not ESPN Plus. I think they still have a long way to go for user-friendly, format, structure. DAZN, from what I've seen, I have not gotten it yet, looks fantastic in terms of just the format of it, how streamlined and efficient it is for the consumer and the operator of it. HBO's gone, and it's the new paradigm, which I've been saying, and I've been banging that drum for a long time. It's going to be DAZN and ESPN Plus, or DAZN and ESPN. I really think that. Obviously, Showtime and Fox have now made a huge comeback to where they're going to be relevant for a long time, and they're still probably the dominant force in boxing in the U.S., but within a conglomerate like ESPN, ABC, and Disney behind top-ranked, behind now Frank Warren, it's interesting. The ball game has completely changed, and where the ball game is being played and how it's being played is just completely different. Again, sort of stitching back, Alvarez, Kovalev 2, most likely going to be on ESPN. Canelo, Triple G, most likely leaving HBO. It's sad day. For people like me who hated HBO broadcasts, always thought they were kind of on the cheap side, and really wasn't a fan of the commentary team that much, except for Max. I think it's a good move. The death of HBO will be long term probably a better thing for the sport. Short term, you might have some negative side effects of it, but very little. But stitching back to Canelo and some news of him, he no longer has to pay that $8.5 million to All-Star Boxing, his former promoter, before he got picked up by Golden Boy. He won his appeal. Salute to him. Obviously, $8.5 million for whoever you are is some money. That's something you just don't want to let up in a lawsuit. So, good for Canelo. He's a young guy. I think he deserves all the money in the world for what he's been doing. Last boxing topic of the day. And again, if you want to get in just for the boxing topic and not wait for the MMA topics to call in, 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue. But Sergey Kovalev versus David Price, official for Joshua versus Povetkin. Oh, God. David Price. R.I.P. David. It's been good. You were a good soldier for Eddie for a long time. I don't know why you're getting all these opportunities, but R.I.P. David Price. But let's cut that shit because let's be honest, he's asking for it. Sergey Kovalev, pretty good prospect out of Russia. I don't know what his ceiling is, but out of all the prospects at heavyweight, he's probably one of the more underrated and just less talked about guys. This would be a good sort of win for him to get over, in my opinion. David Price, even though we all think he's obviously not the greatest boxer, he's easily still a name. Like similar to like Amir Khan, like obviously way different in terms of pro credentials. Obviously, Olympic and amateur credentials pretty close actually, but career-wise completely different. But in terms of that star power, that draw, people care about David Price. The casuals know the name. The second a boxer transcends that boxing bubble in any sort of capacity to the casual audience, I think it's very hard for them to no longer be known. That's why you will always see people like me even talk about the David Prices, the Manny Pacquiaos, the Amir Khans, as long as they're still fighting. Why? Because star power fades very slowly. It was easy for the media and for the fans to sort of not talk about Roy Jones anymore because Roy Jones was never a superstar. And even though David Price isn't that, and et cetera, but Roy Jones never transcended the boxing bubble, in my opinion. Pound for pound, legend, but never transcended that market. So when he's still fighting and losing, we kind of don't care. I think it's very different with guys like David Price, Amir Khan, even Manny Pacquiao on a much bigger scale. because they did transcend that bubble for a period of time. But again, interesting just to see, what's going to happen with David Price in this fight. He's probably going to just die in there, unfortunately. I'm really concerned about his health. Kuzmin is a legit prospect, so at least I'm glad to see him with the name that I know. Coach Mitty in the chat saying, "Yo, Matt, how you doing?" I'm doing good, Mitty. You should call in. You'd have the link. You know how to do that. But we will be moving on to MMA. If you do want to call in, again, 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue. If you haven't pressed 1, because I see Santiago in the queue, I see Campo in the queue. You guys have to press 1 if you want to be in the call. Okay, Campo just press 1. Coach May, though, briefly before I go to Campo, Coach May saying, David Price, bigger name than Roy Jones Jr. David Price in the UK is known by more casual sporting fans than Roy Jones is known by sporting casual fans in the US. You go to, let's say, the average football watcher, the average baseball watcher, they don't know who the fuck Roy Jones is out of a lineup. They don't. They really don't. Does maybe the average football watcher in the UK, to use more of that term, will they recognize their Price more in a lineup? I think so. I might be wrong. Again, maybe I'm totally misreading David Price's stardom or exposure or influence or whatever it is in the UK. If I am, please tell me I'm wrong. But we'll move to Compa because he did call in out from Los Angeles. Compa, how you doing, man? Been a while.
Hey, what's up, man? It's been a while, man. Nice to hear you, man, on your show. How's it going? I'm actually in Anaheim right now, so.
But nice to hear you, man. I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
Good, man. Just ready for the fight this week. And, I think it's going to be a good fight, man. I got to go with Canelo, man. He showed me a lot in the first fight. His good movement. He looked like, I think had it been Floyd boxing Triple G, I think he would have got a UD. But what do you think, man?
I think Canelo should win this one. I'm just doubtful of Triple G's team. I'm doubtful of that coach, to be honest. I've never really trusted Abel Sanchez as an elite mind in the game, and that to me hurts a guy like Triple G. While Canelo, Eddie Reneso, having no real credentials, seems to have his head on his shoulders. He is obviously
right, man.
Sorry, you go.
You can tell they're students of the game, man.
Mm-hmm. Anything else, Compa?
Hey, and I think, yeah, man, I just wanted to touch on the ESPN. I think they messed up, man, by not signing the PBC stable. Gracias. Instead, they signed Top Rank, but I feel like the PBC's deal got, ruined by, writers talking shit about their product. But, it is what it is. I still think Fox and Showtime are going to be putting up the best fights out of all the other stables and promoters. But what you think?
Yeah, I Showtime has the better stable, period. Regardless of what network they're on, PBC has the better stable than Top Rank. They have the more relevant stable as well. That to me, regardless of network, will always sort of weigh in their favor. And I agree. It's kind of unfortunate that ESPN, we couldn't get this perfect world and utopia where every boxing promoter is on ESPN, the home of sports in the U.S. That would make perfect sense.
Or at least on, Showtime and Fox. Fox is, I heard you saying the older generation that was 60, but a lot of that generation is used to watching fights on CBS or, regular TV networks. You get what I'm saying?
Well, they're not used to it. They remember it. Those are two different things. Because they remember the day when they could watch.
The last few years, it has been on free TV.
Yeah, but we don't see,
but
we haven't seen this drastic change in viewership. When that's partial due to the matchmaking and fights they put on Fox and put on CBS and put on NBC. Not all of them have been great cards, and it's one of those things where they exploded so fast. And I think PBC and the guys that worked there, while obviously carrying deeply about the sport and wanting to improve it also put way too much on their plate. They try to go to every network in the world instead of focusing on one or two. And I think that hurt them for a bit, to be honest.
Right, but I mean, I still see, promoters that are with ESPN still putting up worse product on ESPN, and
of course,
nobody calls them out on it. But as soon as the others, PBC did it, they were quick to call them out on it, shit on the fight. Oh, they're killing the sport.
I'm not defending those media members or those fans because they're idiots. Like the people that are biased towards one promoter or network over the other are idiots in my opinion. So I really don't defend them. I don't really address them. My points is more about the actual specifics of the situation. So like PBC, they did great things, but they also did some bad things. Like we should point that out because we want PBC to ultimately be better. Same with Top Rank. Top Rank puts on great fights and they put on shitty fights. ESPN puts on great cards, they put on shitty cards. We need to critique the bad ones and lift up the good ones, regardless of network, regardless of promoter, regardless of country, because we want the sport as a whole to elevate itself.
Yeah. Hey, man, let's hope, Canelo or Triple G, man, let's hope they can step up to the plate, man, and, leave HBO so they could, make some of these fucking marquee matchups with, the PBC stable, man, because there's a lot of good matchups that could be made, but, you know how it is.
Yeah, it's always politics. Thank you, compa. I hope you have a great day, man. And thank you for calling in. Again, call in anytime. Some brief thoughts on Compa's call, just to sort of like wrap it up and give my thoughts on it. Again, I think people get too stuck in camps. Like that's just naturally, I think, how we're wired, like evolutionary. That's how we think is tribal. Back when we were, apes living in the jungle to now, we've lived off of tribes, off of clans. That's always how it's sort of run itself. You take that into the politics world, you take that wherever it is true, especially in sports. With other stick and ball sports, it's a little bit easier because it's your city. Like it's LA versus San Francisco. It's London versus Newcastle. Whatever. It's the city ties you have. With boxing, combat sports, because it's such an individual sport, it becomes different. That's why you get so much more of a obvious or just plain insight, like almost racism in the sport, like racial camps, because that's how we connect with people. People naturally live near people that they look alike. People naturally are friends with people that they look alike. That's a little more natural for us. Again, in the tribal mindset, similar to countries. People in the U.S. are naturally going to root for U.S. promoters, U.S. networks, U.S. fighters over the U.K., over Mexico, over Japan, over Canada, whatever it is. And I think as a culture, we need to get beyond that. And maybe that's obviously a bigger topic for not just boxing, but for boxing, I think we need to get over that because no one is innocent. I talked about this a little bit. The system we have is a flawed system, right? The system of boxing, how it's run, the day-to-day to macro sense, right? How it's run is downright corrupt, it's flawed, it's inefficient. And the people in charge of this system, the people that hold the keys to the system, whether it's Bob Arum, Top Rank, whether it's Eddie Hearn, whether it's Al Heyman, whether it's Don King back in the day, whether it's ESPN, Showtime, Fox, whatever it is, whatever entity or person you want to ascribe that to, they all hold the keys to the kingdom. And they are in charge of a ineffective, corrupt kingdom, right? So let's actually critique that. Because regardless of who it is, there is flaws in them. There's flaws in what they do. And again, I know I have listeners that wave the flag for Eddie Hearn, that wave the flag for PBC, and I get it. And on a very base level, that is good for the sport because it drives up interest, it drives up conflict, and conflict naturally leads to interest in sporting world and sporting culture. However, it has turned into such a vitriolic sense where you have the Steve Kims of the world and the Michael Monteros of the world, and then you have the Dantes and the Eagles of the world, and they are so diametrically opposed in what they think, and yet they both say right things here and there, and they're both wrong here and there. It's going to be, I don't know how that's remedied. I don't know how that's fixed. To fix a culture is hard. To fix a society, a fan base, is something that is almost not impossible to do, but it's impossible to do with one singular thing. It's a combination of factors on how to fix our culture and our community as a boxing fandom. But it again, the tribalism, the flag waving, it's almost pointless because, again, I know that people that do that aren't necessarily the most, clued in on what's happening, aren't necessarily the most well read on what's happening, or the most intelligent when it comes to what's happening, but it's something that I think we need to fix. And again, this isn't about Compa. Compa's a very smart guy, but I understand his thought process is, like, look at all these critics, talking about PBC. They don't talk about Top Rank, and he's right. Michael Montero does not talk about Top Rank in any negative light. Really. Same with the Steve Kims. Same with all these people. They talk about PBC and every wrong thing they do. Whether it be the Gabriel Montoyas of the world, which I have some respect for. Like, I like Gabe, but me and Gabe just got into a beef on Twitter the other day about PBC, and he unfollowed me because of it. That's how upset people get about this, about who's right. Is PBC right or are they wrong? Well, it's not PBC that's right or wrong. It's the system that is wrong. PBC is just a player in the system that is corrupt. So let's get some fucking policemen around this system, because otherwise it's not going to be fixed. But anyways, I know I kind of went on a tangent, went on a rant. You know how I do. Again, calling 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue. Santiago, I think you did press 1 at some point. So, but I think you may want to wait for the MMA topics. So I'll wait for the MMA topics to get to you because you haven't pressed 1 yet. But let's move over to MMA and UFC topics of the day and get off that tangent and rabbit hole because that's something that I'm going to rant about probably till the day I die, let's be honest. BJ Penn versus Ryan Hall. Talk about dying. A little bit on the inside. I died a little bit on the inside when I heard this news. It's official, ladies and gentlemen. BJ Penn versus Ryan Hall. Now, to get the positive out of the way, because there is one silver lining in this. Ryan Hall is not a striker. He is not this athletic freak. He is a grappler by trait. He's a guy that is very defensive-minded first. And that, I think, instinctually makes me think this fight is not too dangerous for BJ Penn. We're not going to see BJ Penn versus Yair Rodriguez, which was sad to watch. We're not going to see that here. However, it's a fight that really I have no interest in. BJ Penn fighting in 2018, I have zero interest in it. I am deeply concerned about his health. It's 100% going to be just a depressing thing to watch. Ryan Hall, he's the epitome of the I don't care face. Resting bitch face is Ryan Hall, but more of a resting I don't care face. Ryan Hall is perpetually stoned. That's how much he just always looked just droopy, I just don't care. What was that Hound Dog cartoon with the really droopy face, stuff like that? Always looked sad. God, I know I should know this. I used to watch that show all the time. Was it Looney Tunes? Was it a Looney Tunes cartoon? I forget what it was, but that's literally what Ryan Hall looks like all the time. A sad, depressed basset hound. And he is going to beat the fuck out of BJ Penn, and it is going to be so depressing to watch. And I don't really know how to deal with it. BJ Penn is a legend, a guy that I looked up to in so many ways. Growing up into this sport, that's a guy that's fought from anywhere from 145 to 200 pounds. Droopy Dog. Thank you, Main Event Mark. Thank you. Thank you. I knew it was something kind of obvious like that. Anyways. What was I going to say? Anyways, yeah, BJ Penn coming back. Ryan Hall, depressing as fuck. I really don't know what to think about it other than I don't want it. Main Event Mark Samuels from the Woody Woodpecker family of characters. Thank you, Main Event Mark, coming in clutch with the pop culture references.
Are you off your tits? Have you been smoking something?
I'm sorry, Eddie. Maybe I have. I can't remember everything. Matt Stats is only right 82.3% of the time, guys. Okay, and everyone. Dennis just came in the chat. Salute to Dennis, one of the great supporters on Patreon, and just one of the guys that've been around since I've started my career in media and been very just appreciative and supportive. Shout out to you, Dennis. But moving on to some more news. Speaking of old men wanting to fight, Gilbert Melendez, or Giblet Melendez, as Reebok has called him, is returning. Not official yet, but in the works for UFC 232 against Arnold Allen, who is a really good prospect out from the UK. Basically, take all my talking points and thought processes about BJ Penn and then cut and paste to Gilbert Melendez. It's just sad. Just really sad to watch. When you see it's hard to see the legends you watch growing up get beat up. That's always sucks. When I remember seeing when Anderson Silva got knocked out for the first time, and I grew up. I remember seeing Anderson Silva do the Pride walkout to Michael Jackson's Thriller, and over a decade later, he gets knocked out by Chris Weidman. I remember that. I remember specifically where I was at in that moment. Similar to Manny Pacquiao, when Manny Pacquiao got knocked out. I remember where I was, I can go on and on, more in MMA topics, a big nog, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, when he got his arm snapped basically in half by Frank Mir. That was just one of those moments. Dennis saying, is this the UFC portion? Yes, it is, Dennis. Yes, it is. If you want to just watch the boxing portion, you can just rewind the show. You're on YouTube, so that's completely possible. Just rewind it to the beginning. It's okay. You can still hang out in the chat, talk about things that I talked about an hour ago. It's completely okay. I will not care. But anyways, yeah, Gilbert Melendez. Oh, God. Just sad. Just sad. I thought I reported on this, but I didn't remember because Anthony Walker from Showtime.com completely hijacked the show yesterday when I was in the middle of the MMA portion of the show. I think this was on the docket for yesterday's show, and I just didn't get to it. But TJ Dillashaw going on the Joe Rogan Experience, the Joe Rogan podcast, and basically talking about Henry Cejudo, fighting Henry Cejudo at 125. That's what he wants. The reason why I think there is some legitimacy to this is because of the injuries of Demetrius Johnson. And again, I think we don't know exactly what is the case there. If Demetrius Johnson has the severity of the injury that he was first reported to, he's going to be out for some time. So in that meantime, there really isn't that clear-cut contender at 125. And at 135, Cruz is coming back from an injury. I kind of want him to have a fight or two before he comes in here. Marlon Moraes, I'm not down for that at this. I'm just not. There's really Rafael Sunsao. Even though I would love to see a trilogy, the hardcore in me, I think would be so gratified that the UFC finally gave Rafael Sunsao that title shot. I just don't think it's happening. I think in a realistic sense, I don't think the UFC is going to do that. They see Rafael Sunsao as just a zero moneymaker, as a non-commodity for them that just keeps winning, unfortunately, and happens to be the best bantamweight to never fight for a belt, never have a belt. If I'm the UFC, I'm 100% pushing for TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo sometime in the next 4 months before the end of the year. I doubt they can have a turnaround for UFC 230. I know they've sort of been talking about trying to find a main event for that. There's something in the works. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be interesting. Javier Dudley saying, Matt, what do you think about Till going to middleweight with all that stacked young talent like Adesanya, Whitaker, and Costa? I think it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. I think Darren Till's going to actually be better at middleweight. I think not cutting that much weight will be beneficial to not only his health, but just his cardio as well. I think his cardio has always been sort of a question of it. And plus, let's not forget that, like, Robert Whittaker moved up after losing to Stephen Thompson, getting knocked out by Stephen Thompson, I believe. No one expected him to be anything at middleweight. We thought he was going to be too undersized, etc. And look where he's at. He's the UFC champion. Look at Kelvin Gastelum. Another guy we always were worried about him actually going to middleweight. And we were always hoping that he could make the cut to 170 because of his height. Guess where he's at? He's now fighting for the middleweight belt. I think guys like Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, the big guys of the division, they're going to be gone soon. Not in terms of retiring, but they're going to go to 205. They're going to have to go to 205. They're going to be too old to cut that weight, and plus, that division's just easier. Like Luke Rockhold, even though he has massive technical flaws and just a chinny demeanor, let's be honest, he could go now and just rule at 205 if Daniel Cormier and John Jones never come back. And at this trajectory, that is highly probable that we don't see John Jones or Daniel Cormier come back to 205. It's a possibility. So Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman could easily go up there to light heavyweight, run that division for a bit. So I see guys like Paulo Costa, same. I think he will eventually move up as well, but obviously he's younger. He's going to be in the middleweight division for a while. But I would love a Bohachina versus Darren Till fight. You tell me that you wouldn't watch that and be entertained by it? Hell yeah. Fuck yeah, I would be. Darren Till versus Derek Brunson is a good fight. Like, I like that one. Even though that's obviously not the best one you can make. But, Darren Till versus Jacare. Darren Till versus a lot of guys in that division makes some sense to me. And plus, I just truly believe that a lot of these guys are cutting too much weight. I think it would be beneficial to him if he moves up. But moving on, last topic of the day, and then we'll go over to Santiago. Even though he hasn't pressed one yet, because I'm just going to go to him even if he doesn't want to. Combate Americas has signed a multi-year streaming deal with DAZN, so salute to them. DAZN getting more properties makes sense. I'm not too familiar with Combate Americas. I know what it is. It's just a very small show. Like it's a predominantly Hispanic market or very Mexican, South American market for MMA that doesn't have a huge presence in the U.S. Now, for hardcores, it's awesome. So, like, once I get DAZN, the fact that I get Combate Americas, Bellator without the fucking tape delay, and Matchroom World Boxing Super Series, DAZN's worth the money. This is just an added value to it. It's not one of those that's going to change the game for DAZN, but a good pickup for them. And plus, obviously, DAZN really trying to make a splash, I think, in more of the hardcore demographics of the sport. I think that's sort of been evident as well, that DAZN is... They know, I think they can't compete with the name value of an ESPN or Fox or Showtime in the U.S., so what they're going to do is pick up all these hardcore darlings. Like, Combate Americas is a hardcore darling. World Boxing Super Series is a hardcore darling. Like, us hardcores love these entities because they're exactly what we want. We want exposure for these markets, for these divisions, these styles of fights and events. And no major network is really going to sign on to them because they're not really money makers in a sense. DAZN has probably realized a formula to, hey, we can pick up this content, this IP, intellectual property, and run it for a low cost, stream it, and sort of get that hardcore base in. Because before they even think about getting the casual, like, fight fan, they're going to have to get the hardcore fight fan first. They just have to. It would be counterintuitive to do it the other way around. It's unlikely to see casual entities or promoters or fighters, people that translate to the casual fan base, like an Eddie Hearn, for example, as a promoter, or a Canelo as a fighter, go to a small time deal like this, and then on top of it, drastically change it. You know, you need a bunch of... It's a little bit along the lines of my thought process with the regional scene for MMA and how the UFC handles it when I was talking about it with Anthony Walker yesterday, and how, you know, you don't go in there with a big star, and one big star for the UFC was like Cain Velasquez in Mexico. That's not how you translate or convert that market into a moneymaker for you and just a big market. You go in there, construct gyms, construct facilities, construct regional scenes and promoters, and you start building up a small local base for the hardcores in that community, in that market, and then you build it up from scratch. You know, you need a clear foundation, similar to, I think, DAZN signing these smaller, more hardcore known entities and just properties, is because you need that foundation. You need the hardcores there first before you can get the Manny Pacquiaos, the Canelos, the Triple Gs, and then get the more casual viewers over there, in my opinion. Just my way of looking at how you would run it as a business and try to, like, long-term how to develop it. But Santiago, you haven't pressed one. So I feel like you're probably working and busy, and I'm not going to go to you, but it's okay. I forgive you. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. Santiago, if you do want to call in, press 1. Otherwise, we're going to head out of here. Another daily edition of the show. Be back tomorrow. Obviously, same time as always, 10 p.m. Eastern. Santiago. See, you sure press 1 the whole time, man. What are you doing here?
Just messing with you. I'm on my break right now.
What's up?
Not much. It's a fun fact that, you know, you bring up about how Canelo and GGG, you know, with their contract coming up on HBO. I was actually having this conversation with the postal service worker when I was shopping off mail at work today about that, because, like, for me, it became very evident about where HBO's intentions were ever since it was made clear that most of their budget was going towards their Game of Thrones. And, you know, you can see it. You can see how things have changed ever since then, you know. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for me at least, putting it into context, right, if we were just to limit this between HBO and Showtime, right, HBO does not have any service within their own apps to let us, like, watch their shows live through their apps. It's either HBO Now or you watch whatever's available on HBO Go if you happen to have the service. But Showtime has a Showtime Anytime app where if I'm on the road or I'm at home or something's happening in my cable box, I can just load up the app, and if it happens to be live, I can watch it live on the app. So, you know, gone are the days when HBO really was the home of boxing. Because, like, you know, you think about it back then, you know, that's where you saw most of the championships. That's where you saw most of the history being made. You know, Showtime came so much later, but, you know, now we have ESPN, we have DAZN, we have all these different services to watch it on streams. Not illegal streams either, that too, you know, Facebook and whatnot. So this is just clear evidence. And not only that too, you know, I mean, you can see it just by the amount of fights that we do get, but, you know, we can easily pick at how many fights we've had on HBO alone. You know, we can count that in one hand. And, you know, besides the point, you know, it's kind of like, it's sad because I remember, you know, HBO was my introduction to, like, the whole boxing thing, you know, the La Jolla Pacquiao and whatnot, but it is what it is at this point, and, you know, what more else is to be said about that, you know?
Well, also, just to piggyback off of that, the point you made in the beginning about the HBO budget going to Game of Thrones and stuff like that, I think people, you know, they really don't understand the difference in, let's say, like, The Sopranos back in the day on HBO and the budget The Sopranos had compared to Game of Thrones. So that's why HBO was allowed to have so much boxing content back in the day, even though it always had really big-time, premium drama shows. But those shows were low budget. Game of Thrones is not that. Game of Thrones is a you know, major production company, blockbuster movie, 10 weeks out of the year, every week, and that is a gigantic budget. And I think they realize, look, we're getting tens of millions of views for these Game of Thrones guys, while we're getting 700,000 views for this boxing fight, and we're paying them millions. It's just not worth the money at this point for us. I think that was just clearly the calculation, like you said, of HBO. The second they started losing fights, and the second Game of Thrones became such a big budget, massive success.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure, like, you remember when they were first hyping this up too, like that whole The Mountain versus Conor McGregor. I'm sure you saw a video or two of that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's how you knew where their intentions lie when they were trying to promote some of the actors and characters of that show. But really, that's all I really do have to say on that topic, and I think you've pretty much had to speak any of that to, like, clarify how different it was between having The Sopranos and Game of Thrones with boxing. So if you have anything else, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I got to get back to work.
Have a great day at work, Santiago. And yes, I mean, I think people, not that they don't believe it. I think it's just not a thought process. Like, people don't really think about it on a day-to-day basis. Like, man, like HBO back in the day had Sopranos, which was a fantastic show, but that was all filmed inside a bar, inside small diners in the tri-state area. Like, that was a very low budget, costless show to make. Your biggest expenditures are probably just the salaries of the actors and actresses on that show. While Game of Thrones, that's not the case. I guarantee you the effects budget far outweighs what these individual actors are getting paid. It has to, with the effects they have. The type of sets they have to build. It's just an entirely different stratosphere of budget for that type of show compared to Sopranos, even though they're probably both similar in terms of, like, cultural awareness. Like, back in the day, Sopranos was a transcendental TV show. But yeah, at that same time, we had Oscar De La Hoya fighting, Manny Pacquiao fighting, Mayweather fighting, all on HBO Network. Like, all three of those guys were HBO fighters. Think about that. There was a day and age where Sopranos was on, the biggest show on TV probably at the time, and the biggest boxers in the world were all on the same network. HBO could afford that. Why? Because of budgets. Nowadays, it's very different. But ladies and gentlemen, that is it for MCR. Again, be back later tomorrow, same time as always. Fights also tonight on ESPN2. Fights tomorrow on ESPN. So make sure you tune into those, as I will as well. But like I've said, it's been your daily dose of combat sports. Hit the like button on the way out. Share the show on the way out. And again, head over to patreon.com/MixedCombatRadio to help support the channel in any financial way. Obviously, if you listen on podcasts, we're on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Drop that review. It is always helpful. I am Matt, the Hipster Hunter. Hipsters here. Haters beware. You can find me at Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms. MCR Podcast or Mixed Combat Radio, all platforms. What else? A couple more housekeeping things. We are desperately looking for a Instagram director. No offense, Kyle, but you've been slipping. I need someone else to head it up and to really be more active on that. Drew on Twitter has been doing an awesome job. Shout out to you, Drew. I've been really appreciative of what you've been doing on Twitter. Obviously, Santiago, part-time co-host, salute to you as well. Always helping out when you can. To those that are on Patreon supporting the channel, thank you. Rick, Castle Hill Gill, Nija, Rob, Fugatti, Drew, Kyle, Dennis. I'm going to forget names. I'm going to feel really bad because it's off the dome. Who else? Fuck. I can't believe I'm forgetting names. There's some great people on Patreon. Just, again, thank you to everyone on there. Without you, this is not possible. And have a fantastic day. Peace.